Hello, everybody. I'm Marty Miller, Master Educator for National Academy of Sports Medicine, but also Director of Education and Training for Technogym North America. And I can't thank you enough for time out of your busy schedules to hop on today. It's a topic that I love, I'm passionate about. It's cognitive fitness. We're going to go over some current trends and some programming concepts. So we're going to talk about it from the training method to true practical applications. I hope you find it as engaging, as exciting of a topic as I do. So welcome. So first, let me start with how this topic became so important to me. So a few years ago, I had the privilege of training a client at the facility I was at prior to coming to Technogym. And he was a great athlete back in his day and still liked to train like an athlete. And I know a lot of you know I like the concept of everyone's an athlete. And you've heard me talk about that I'm going to train my elite athletes the same as I would my recreational athletes. Same body, same muscles, same joints, same capacities, just what's their ability. So with this individual named Jeff, he was awesome, loved to work hard. But he came down after a few years of him and I training, he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. So he was going to attack it. Just that's the mindset he had. So this challenged me to look deeper into the research. And I wanted to make sure that I was armed with the best information that I had to help him along his journey. So this is where it came from. And since then, I've been truly passionate because I think a lot of you have heard me talk before, or if you haven't, I truly believe that fitness professionals are our first line of defense when it comes to healthcare. I'm an athletic trainer. I've been in the medical field, but my true passion is getting people healthier. And we have that role and responsibility as that first line of defense in healthcare, keeping people healthy, and everyone's going to have different challenges. So this content is important for every person you're going to train because everyone is going to have the ability to improve their cognitive fitness, and it's going to carry over just like all these other health benefits we get from working out. But now we can add in that cognitive fitness. So I look forward to going through this with you as we go through the slide presentation. So as we move forward, we're going to go through a lot of different concepts. First, I'll give you a quick introduction about Technogym. Like I said, I was privileged to now be the Director of Education going on my third year. Technogym was founded in 1983 by Mr. Nerio Alessandri in his family's garage in Cesena, Italy. And back then, he had the vision to blend technology with fitness. And here we are today, some 30 years later, and boy, oh boy, has that really come to the forefront, especially in today's environment with how we're having to connect with everybody digitally during this unique time. So, as we move forward here, you're going to see a little bit about our heritage. So Technogym has been the sole provider equipment for the last 7 Olympic Games. And we're going to pause here for a second. And the reason that this is so important was not necessarily just that we brought equipment to all of the facilities within the Olympic Village. It's the ability to work with the world's greatest athletes, the world's greatest coaches, physical therapists, athletic trainers, fitness professionals. And if you look at it, it's a case study in human performance like other. You have male athletes, you have female athletes, you have power athletes, you have endurance athletes. So it really allowed Technogym to get in the minds of the greatest coaches. Now, for a lot of you that have been in the fitness industry for some time, I'm sure you recognize that a lot of the things that come into fitness start in the world of sports performance. That's where a lot of the research is done because we're always trying to push the envelope with the world's greatest athletes. And then that carries over to the fitness industry. So in today's realm, whether you see all the recovery techniques, whether you see the high intensity training, a lot of this started in elite sports. So that's why it's so important for me to highlight this because cognitive as well. Think about athletes under stress from concussions now. So if you're working with the world's greatest athletes or amateur athletes, this cognitive fitness will still absolutely apply to that clientele. Just please don't think about it for that aging or senior population. It's going to cross all gamuts, just like fitness does. Regardless of who you train, this is going to be very pertinent to your everyday practice. So now we're going to move more into the subject matter. So what I like to do here is what I call my caveman theory. So you'll see there that you got that poor caveman being chased, right? So the key point here is as we go through this, you'll see that if we didn't grow up in top physical shape, we didn't grow up at all. Think about that for a second, right? So even though this might have been 10,000 years ago, the brain truly hasn't changed much in how it develops, right? It's there for survival. It's there to keep us safe. So men used to cover up to 10 to 15 miles per day, and women covered up to at least 8 miles per day. So let's pause and think about that for a second. So if they were covering 10 to 15 miles a day or 8 miles a day, they had elevated heart rate a lot of the day. And if you really think about it, cavemen didn't stay in their cave to learn. They had to go out as they moved and interact with their environment and learn as they were processing information with that elevated heart rate. Well, that's how the brain's designed to work. So now we fast forward to the year 2020, and this has been going on for some time now. People are less active. They don't work out as much. They don't get their heart rate up. And we're going to go through some of the science on what really goes on in the brain when your heart rate goes up. We wonder why now we have some of these functional declines. Now, of course, we're living longer. So there's going to be a natural decline. But if you think about it, we're all fitness professionals in here. We have that interest and passion. We know we can increase muscle mass as we get older. We can still train for that. We know we can improve cardio and balance and all these other physical entities in fitness. Well, why can't we maybe change also what goes on in the brain? Why can't we prevent those declines or maybe reverse it if we add training in? And we're going to cover that. But when we look at caveman versus the average person nowadays, if you think about it, there's been studies out there that show, and the study that I just pulled this morning, from 2008 to 2016, less than 30% of the population were meeting the minimum requirement for aerobic and strengthening guidelines. Now, I kind of learned this when I was doing my doctoral research, that you got to be careful when you ask people to submit their own opinion on their activities. That might be slightly inflated. Maybe it's less than that, but that's the minimum requirement. And so we have a population of at least 70% that are gearing themselves to a lot of the things that we know about from a decline in health and wellness, but now we have to add also in that cognitive function as well. So pretty cool information that we can use now to kind of get out there and get people moving. So as we move forward here, we're going to continue to talk about that science. But one thing that popped up is, healthcare is the best preventative medicine, right? Just recently, I know we've all been watching the news, and I saw something come out that saying that the fitter the person, the less likely they are to get COVID. Not saying you're not going to get it, just less likely or better chance of coming out of it. Well, we know that from other diseases. But you can see here on the slide that 1 in 3 American adults has high blood pressure, and this puts them at risk for heart disease and stroke. These are conditions that lead to a huge amount of deaths in the United States and throughout the world. Now, here's an interesting link. High blood pressure can also impact brain health in significant ways. So if we have 1 in 3 adults that have high blood pressure, and yes, they're medicated, but we don't know if there's not other things that go on because they're controlling it with medication. But it just shows you that 1 in 3 have this high blood pressure we know the other issues from it, but now we have to tie in the potential cognitive issues as well. So the research has shown that treating high blood pressure, no matter what type of hypertensive drug you use, can reduce dementia risk by 12% and the risk of developing Alzheimer's disease by 16%. So clearly we need to pay attention to the individuals that have high blood pressure. And if you look at Mayo Clinic, they had their top 10 ways for for controlling blood pressure. Number 1 and 2 were all about what we do every single day. Have people lose the extra pounds and watch their waistline and exercise regularly. Shocker, once again, exercise is the best preventative measure for healthcare. So we'll slide forward here now and we'll get into some other cool topics. So I like to call and challenge everyone to free the athlete within. And I already kind of prefaced this. Everybody's an athlete. Does not matter who you're training. You need to focus on them as an athlete, and you want them to focus on themselves as an athlete. And the 2 reasons. 1, everybody has the same human capacities: power, agility, speed, stamina. It's what's their ability within those capacities. And you all know, NASM certified personal trainers, you know how to safely take people through the OPT model and progress them and find a way to improve that within their ability. Also, though, when we talk about freeing that athlete within, it holds them accountable, makes them want to challenge themselves a little bit, and now you'll see these capacities. But the key thing is you're going to see a lot of research on cognitive from athletes. Well, that's okay. We can correlate that back over to the fact that everybody's that athlete. So these are our 4 main pillars we want to focus on. But of course, there has to be that foundation and proper human movement. So you'll see your flexibility, mobility, and strength and stability is your baseline. But then you can work on these 4 main capacities. So let's move forward here and continue on this discussion. So I could spend a lot of time on this, but take a look and just kind of dig through that slide. You're going to see that the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, the occipital lobe, cerebellum, and temporal lobe all have different functions. We know that. But look how exercise affects them all and slightly differently. So this is why when we go back to the pillars, when we add in cognitive, when we talk about going through the OPT model, having a different training experience is not just good for all the reasons we talk about it in that undulating periodization and how it's good to prevent injuries. Let's now talk about an undulating periodization process for the brain, right? We want to be able to activate all these parts of the brain differently to keep them all engaged. And there's unique ways that you can do that with different forms of exercise. So we'll slide forward here on our next slide. So I put this in here because, yes, it's about elite soccer players and agility and cognitive enhancement. But I've already talked about that a lot of the research is going to start from elite athletes. But again, we still can make these changes to our level. It might not be as elite as them, but that doesn't mean that this research is still not good for us. So a couple key points is I highlight in the second bullet point, you'll see that the better performance on agility tests had a positive reaction on decision time or cognitive factors. Think about the slide we had just shown. And then also here, cognitive skills could be enhanced via specific agility training. Okay, well, why would we, remember how I said train every athlete? If I don't put agility training into my country club athlete, my senior athlete, one, there's the safety issue that we talk about, the ability to change direction and not fall. So there's activities of daily life, but you're also neglecting the cognitive benefits of agility training. So again, this is why I love to put this type of research in here, because I know it's easy to understand why an elite soccer player would need agility, but everybody's an athlete and everyone needs their agility within their ability. That rhymed. So that way they can even get the cognitive benefits out of it. So that's why I wanted to put that slide in there for you. So again, here, this was looking at athletes. And again, decision time is highly correlated with agility. Easy to understand why elite athletes, mixed martial artists, that's a safety mechanism for them to be able to change and have decision time rapidly. But again, I go back to if I was training my mom, as she steps off a curb or as she processes information, it might be slower than the speed I'm functioning at, but if I can keep her sharp, that can end up saving her from having a traumatic injury. So there's that carryover to everybody no matter what. So again, we want to always tie this in to the model, but also now the cognitive component is underneath it. Excellent. So now we'll move forward. So this is a really cool slide. This slide shows the positive correlation between physical activity and cognition over time. So there's a couple cool bullet points here, but like the fourth one, reduce risk of dementia and cognitive decline. A lot of people don't think about that when they're increasing their physical activity, because again, I've worked in elite sports and I've also worked in private country clubs, and a lot of trainers and or members themselves self-limit, going, oh, I can't work hard. I'm like, well, you can work effectively, you can work safely, you can work on a progressive level, but what's going to happen if we challenge you a little bit? And again, you guys are pros. You'll know how to do it safely, but I can increase power with my, athletes, regardless of their age, battling ropes, shadow boxing. I don't care how you do it. Just make sure it gets into that program, because think about if you can reduce the risk of dementia and that cognitive decline over time, that is powerful. And then again, I did the webinar last week on recovery with Kyle Stahl, and we know how important sleep is. So that's why we have to, get into that appropriate program, make it progressively challenging as needed for that client. But look at those two beautiful points right there. And again, if you back up one, perceptions of quality of life, I could go on and on. We're on this webinar because we all love fitness, but now let's get our clients to understand why it's so important to progress and how it's going to affect their cognitive health as well. So as we move forward here, this is really important. BDNF. If you get one or two takeaways, I encourage you to think about BDNF and dig into the research on it. Brain-derived neurotropic factor. Now, I could spend a lot of time on this. Going back, when I did my doctorate, I looked at why people exercise and why they don't. I found out a lot about myself as well. I love my resistance training, all three phases. Cardio, I enjoy it. I know I need it, but I need a goal. I need some reason to do it more so than my resistance training. So I'm going to pause here and I'm going to bring Jeff back in, one of my favorite clients ever. Jeff loved to do his weight training. Loved to do that. If I ask you cardio, you guys know the answer. We send them off to their cardio. What do? They run out the back door, or they do the same cardio program they've done forever and they don't really challenge themselves. Now, there's clearly some true cardio enthusiasts out there, so don't get me wrong. But I think we all know that type of client that they'll do it, but it's not their favorite. They don't really push the envelope. So as I was working with Jeff, studied BDNF, and you'll see here it's a gene that's going to provide instructions for making a protein found in the brain and spinal cord. That what it'll do is it's going to help promote the survival of nerve cells. Think about that for a second, right? This is fertilizer for the brain. And by playing this role in growth, maturation, it helps the maintenance of these brain cells. It's amazing stuff. Well, guess when it gets released? Once you do higher cardiovascular work for prolonged periods of time, but you really want to get that heart rate up past what most people do. Again, safe and effective. You guys will figure out the how. I'm just giving you the why. So I would work Jeff out, and I would do some amazing things with Jeff that I could do with him to really keep him interested, keep him engaged, pushing his fitness, and really working on the things he needed to work on. But I'd ask him to go do his cardio, and he's like, oh, I'm busy. I'm like, Jeff, you're retired. You're not busy. You just don't want to do your cardio. He's like, yeah, you're right. I don't like it. So I broke this out, explained to him in very easy terms about what BDNF was, and that he's only going to get it after 20 minutes of cardio, and that he's got to get his heart rate monitor on, and he's got to achieve a certain heart rate. And when I made it important to him, he never missed a beat. He never missed a workout, because he knew if he wanted to combat this neurodegenerative disease that he was faced with in Parkinson's, that was going to be his best friend, that BDNF. Now, you could say, well, my clients may or may not care about it because they don't have a hereditary for it. They don't have it. Well, why would we not want to build the best foundation, just like we would with bone density or muscle mass, before we start to face a problem with it? So I promise you that digging into this is going to really, no pun intended, get you excited, get your brain fired up about what this is. But this is something that was really important to me. And I really, when I tell the story to my clients, they get it. And they're like, wow, you're telling me that there's a hormone released in my brain that is going to protect my brain long term? I'm in. So check out BDNF. So now let's talk about some cognitive training and some cognitive training concepts. A lot of things you can do. Now, I don't care what you have in your facility. I'm going to give you some concepts, and you will figure out how to put them into your program some way, somehow. So the reason I picked this slide is I love our skill mill from Technogym, that curved non-motorized treadmill. And the reason I love it, and this picture is so important, the first thing you're going to notice, there's no TV. And the reason is we don't want people to check out. We want people focused on the task at hand because they have to be in control. I could get into the sports performance part of it, and that's a whole other webinar, right? But you're the motor, you're the brakes. You are constantly controlling the speed, the acceleration, the deceleration. There's a whole bunch of other cool features about it. If you want to know that from an orthopedic standpoint, hit me up. You'll have my email. But think about what's going on in the brain when I'm in control of that skill mill, when I'm the one controlling the acceleration, deceleration. Now, going back to agility, I'm okay if somebody has to hold on the entire time. That's still going to increase their cognitive activity. Maybe they progress eventually to walking on that without holding on. That's fine. But think about, again, how you can use the equipment you have in and around you to increase their capacity, their engagement. So again, I'm always going to say you guys will find what's safe. But if you have people that just go on, let's say the recline bike, there's a time and a place where I love them. But if you want it to be part of their cognitive training program, what can I do on a recline? I can check out a little bit mentally. Not saying that you don't want them on there on occasion, but I'm going to try to challenge them. If they're on a recline because they like it, maybe I'll have them listen to an audio book instead of their music where they check out. Maybe I'll sit there and I'll throw some questions at them, and you'll see some of the gamification we can talk about here. Just getting their brain as engaged as possible while they're doing their cardio. On our equipment, we have the outdoor trails where people are going to be more engaged than just checking out a lot of different things. Just think about it differently next time you put somebody on cardio. So we're going to move forward here. If there's a book that I recommend, easy read for your members as well and yourself, read Spark. If there is one book that I'd recommend by Dr. John Ratty, it's been out for a while now. He's written a couple other. But some quotes from him. Exercise influences the brain directly at the cellular level. He goes through a study that was in Naperville, Illinois, about how they were about to get rid of their phys ed program. And I'm going to pause here for all of you parents right now. All of a sudden, you took on a full-time job as a teacher. I know we respect teachers even more now. But they did a study. They put their physical education first thing in the morning. and their test scores went up tremendously. They made them wear a heart rate monitor. They made phys ed totally different than what it ever was before. And they scored in the top 5 worldwide on the standardization test for math and science, I believe it was. Maybe what you want to do is get your kids up and get them into their phys ed first before you sit down and have them do their other homework. Just a suggestion. I'd love to hear how it goes. Change it up, shoot me an email. I know that's how I was as a kid. There's no way I could have sat in a desk all day and then maybe did phys ed at the 8th, 9th class. It would have been better for me to have it first thing in the morning. We know why now from how the brain fires up. And there's been studies that show you'll absorb information better right after exercise. So if there's something that you really got to dig in and study, so let's say you've got, you're going to take the corrective exercise or this, the nutrition, and you really want to focus on something, go exercise, come back and see if you absorb that material better. We know this second quote from Human Movement. The brain's not hardwired. It's constantly being rewired, or we wouldn't be able to change people's movement patterns, right? So again, this is why we want to bring in the cognitive part to fitness. And then clearly these movement patterns, neurons that fire together, wire together. So we'll slide forward here. And they've done some really cool research on individuals that have had strokes. And they've mapped the brain and knowing where the brain functions, like what part of the brain takes over. And if somebody technically would have a stroke and that part has been damaged, you think that the individual would never be able to bring that function back. But due to neuroplasticity and good training, the brain will remap the brain and allow a different part of the brain to take over. Just fascinating stuff. So I love this quote here: to keep our brains at peak performance, our bodies need to work hard. Goes back to the Caveman Theory. That's why the brain was developed, was to create motion, process information, because that's how the only way they could survive. Now, the second quote, I'm going to preface it. I am by no means downplaying the need for the medical involvement for, true depression, anxiety, all that, antidepressants. Absolutely. The only point that was made in the book here is if you're not exercising, it's making things worse. It's like taking a depressant. So again, exercise is not saying that we're going to take away that. That's not for us to do. Obviously, though, anyone that deals with individuals that are going through this, they know exercise is a huge part of their overall health. I'm just saying that we all know any day you don't work out that you're supposed to, you just feel different. So we want to get people out there exercising. And more than ever today, man, oh man, have I learned this the hard way. The world is getting faster. We cannot afford to let our brains get slower. I was comfortable before this whole stay at home. I worked from home, but I only needed 1 or 2 apps, 1 or 2 platforms. And I've now learned, Microsoft Teams. I'm better at Zoom. Constantly having to learn new things, which is a great, great thing. So just to, again, a way to kind of get people interested, have them read that book. I would definitely, without a doubt, encourage it for every single person in here. So this slide here, what we're seeing here with the neuroimaging breakthroughs is just talking about how exercise improves overall brain health. So if you look here, this study was from 2019. Aerobic exercise increased right and left anterior hippocampal volume. So think about that. If you could increase muscle mass, cardiovascular output, well, now you can say that, hey, it's harder to measure, of course, in the gym, but now you can talk about how exercise hypertrophies your brain. And the hippocampus is part of the limbic system and plays a very important role in the consolidation of information as you bring information in from short-term to long-term memory, and in spatial memory, and enables navigation. So you'll see older studies here as well, but again, we've got research from 2019 on how your hippocampus can increase in volume. Amazing stuff. So we'll slide forward here. Awesome. So this is a really nice graph. And what it's basically showing is short and long-term effects of physical activity on cognition. This is just talking about how including acute increase in serum levels of BDNF, which I've already talked about, and that longer-term hippocampal BDNF upregulation, or just the ability to use it better, is shown in the previous slide. Large body of research that shows that physical activity can change the function of those neurotransmitters in the brain. So the little quotes here on the side, we need something that requires intense focus throughout our lifespan, and that can change, of course. And keeping the mind alive requires something new with intense focus. So we should always be looking for that challenge. It doesn't have to be an education course. It doesn't have to be, a formalized education, but something that we're going to look at and try to do a little differently and try to really focus on. So I like that graph. So now we'll slide forward one. Excellent. And now we're going to talk about what I call the big three. So if, as we're doing our cardiovascular exercise, if you want to challenge your clients, and again, cardiovascular doesn't have to be just on set equipment. It can be as you're doing body weight exercise, etc. You can kind of gamify it a little bit in what we call the big three. So we have direct recall, problem solving, decision making, and spatial awareness. So just a couple examples. Direct recall could be, I've got Greg on here, my editor, who's running this for me. I could say, hey, before the webinar, I want you to remember these three things. And then we go through our process, and at the end, he's got to recall them. Or every couple of minutes on our cardio, like I said, you could put somebody on the recline bike. I could say, okay, perfect. I want you to remember apple, cat, banana. 3 minutes goes by. I come up and ask them again. They repeat it. Another 3 minutes, I'm like, repeat it, but now it's backwards. Or I can add a fourth one to it. It doesn't have to be complex, and I'll show you a graph here in a few seconds on that. Problem solving could be math, right? It could be simple spelling, nothing crazy. Decision making, you can create some type of obstacle course in your fitness center and say, I want you to walk around something, go over something, go under something. And again, spatial and awareness plays into that. One of the things I did with spatial awareness is, you could use those cone drills or dot drills, a lot of different things you can do. So we'll slide forward here. So this is a really cool chart here. So what we're doing is looking at the effects of training on cognition. And all we're saying is that, one, we want to make sure that as people's skills gets higher, we want to eliminate their boredom and their routine and their loss of interest, because, again, we want to keep them cognitively engaged. But we got to be careful not doing it too quick or too difficult, so there's that anxiety and frustration or a fear of failure. So, again, as they improve, you just slowly add to it, but you will be stunned asking simple math questions, how some people, like I had them do it when they were doing jumping jacks. I'd be, all right, give me jumping jacks, go. 5 times 5. And they would slow down. I said, I didn't say slow down your jumping jacks. Keep doing your jumping jacks, same tempo, but now ask, and I would do simple math questions. So don't think it's got to be complex. Understand that you can add and continue to progress, but make sure that it's interesting for them, enjoyable, but not to where it's a point of frustration. So we'll slide forward here on the next chart. This is really cool here, just kind of lays out, the requisitions and regressions and progressions. So attention tasks, you decrease the amount of time focusing on a topic, naming as many words as you can that start with L. I've said, how many stop signs did you have to go past on your way here? Progression is increase the amount of time focusing, name as many words you can that start with L. Just again, getting them to go a progression, regression, memory task, you give them a single word or you give them pairs of words. That processing speed, use 2 numbers, or then you can bump it up to 3. So you can see here how you can increase the demands. But as you increase the physical demand, make sure you be careful with increasing the cognitive demand at the same time. 1, it's got to be fun, but 2, it's got to be safe. So we'll slide forward. So here's great tips again, the attention task, attention to that sensory stimuli, audible cues, visual cues, external focus, those memory tasks, asking them again to remember steps, processes, anything you want to give them. Visual recall is a great way to do it. The processing task, higher temporal speed demands, how fast movements are executed based on visual and auditory sensory cues. And then we have our executive function here, those open skills, enjoyable, make them challenging, reactionary, the lights rate. Again, you'll see some slides here in a few on some things that we use on our equipment to really create that as well. So next slide. So now, a lot of you we invited from our team here for Technogym. So I'm going to highlight just a couple key features on our skill line that seem more performance oriented, but now can be cognitive gaming as well. So in case you have that line of equipment, so we'll slide forward. So on our skill line, we have what we call advanced biofeedback or biofeedback, where when you're running, you're going to see your ground contact time, stride length, and your running power and your cadence. Again, if I'm focused on these training parameters, one, orthopedically, I'm talking to NASM. Obviously, you guys want movement efficiency, but it's also keeping me more engaged with what's going on in my body and my brain as my heart rate's being elevated. So if I see a differentiation right versus left, one, it's great from the orthopedic standpoint, but now I'm tying in that cognitive process as well. So that's one way to gamify it. So we'll slide to the next one. Then on the skill run, you can do, again, the sled push. So I do my sled push for, let's say, 20 yards, and my power is equal right versus left. Great. Higher intensity, still safe. Or what if my power now is 10% more on the left than the right? Now as I push that sled next time, I have to correct that. Or you might say, hey, Marty, you did 160 watts. Now let's get to 170. So again, I'm just tying in that ability to be connected with my brain as I'm exercising. We'll slide forward here. This is a product I love. I actually purchased one because cycling was not my best. So on this, there's a cool training features, but we have what we call pedal printing, that biofeedback. So I will sit there and I will get lost for 8 to 10 minutes at a time trying to balance everything out perfectly. One, because I want symmetry from a joint standpoint, but two, I just kind of gamify it. So you'll see at the top, those bell-shaped curves is my symmetry as I'm cycling. Am I equally doing a downstroke and upstroke effectively? Or am I doing one more than the other? And then the power, left versus right. So yes, it's great for that ability to be a more efficient cyclist and produce more force, as well as reduce injury. But I like it now because it keeps me focused on a task instead of just pedaling and listening to music. So that's a pedal printing technology. I told you I'd come back to the skill mill. So again, it's auto-correcting, forces a lot of biomechanical advantages that way. But again, I have to be in control of my speed, both in acceleration and deceleration, as well as I now have to be much more focused because that belt will not move without me doing the right biomechanics. And due to the fact that there's no TV, because of the complexity in a safe way, I now have to be more engaged cognitively as well while I'm on the skill mill. The beauty behind it is, remember how I said we have to get people's heart rate up. So when you're on a self-propelled skill mill, we know that you work harder than on a motorized treadmill. So now this is a great way to get that heart rate up while improving their cognitive ability. Slide forward here. So power walking, again, don't think you have to run. The power walking with just a little bit of the magnetic resistance. So again, Technogym Skill Mill is the only one in the market that has the ability to add a little bit of the magnetic resistance. We have 10 levels. So just simply walking with that added magnetic resistance increases the heart rate. So now I'm getting that better response from that cardiovascular response, getting the blood flow to my brain, getting that BDNF, why I have to be mentally engaged the entire time. Now, that doesn't mean you still can't challenge people. They're very efficient on that skill mill. Remember what I said? It's complexity versus intensity. If walking on a skill mill has now become easy for them cognitively, start throwing a couple math questions at them. Again, just do it to where it's safe. So now, again, I've already mastered the ability to walk, and it's a little more where my brain can check out. Now I could add something else. So cool ways to do it. Our skill row is another great way to add in performance with cognition. So there's a lot of cool features, but I'm going to highlight here what we call the gist row. Again, we have the multi-drive, so we can add the magnetic resistance, so we can make this as engaging from a cardiovascular standpoint as needed to get that heart rate up safely and effectively. And rowing's great for people that want to protect their joints. But what you're seeing here is real-time feedback. You're seeing your true stroke length, and at what point in the stroke, that's that little number 43 that you see there, at what point did you hit your peak force? Efficient rowers will hit their peak force between 45 and 50% of their stroke length. Well, if I'm rowing and I'm kind of disconnected and I don't have that feedback given to me, I don't know if I'm efficient. So now with the Skill Row app, I be dialed in, focused on my form and technique and my efficiency from a rowing standpoint. But again, if I'm watching that in real time, every single stroke, that means I'm more in tune cognitively with my body, as well as when my heart rate's up, I'm going to be more focused on the task at hand. So another easy way to bring in some cognition as you're working on improving performance. So the key thing is to train smarter. We all know that. That's why you're with NASM. You want that systematic evidence-based approach. It's not just about training harder, but now let's take it to that next level and bring in that cognitive fitness to what you guys are doing each and every day. So I can't thank you enough for your time. I'll be happy to stay on and see if there's any questions. You guys have my email address as well. Do not hesitate to reach out to me there. Some of you may have my NASM email, but feel free to reach out to me here on the technogym.com email, mmiller, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. But we've got some time here. So I'm not sure, Greg, if any questions came in during the webinar, but I'd be happy to answer any. Excellent. If you guys have any questions, feel free to send them in to my producer here, Greg, and he'll be happy to give them to me, and I can answer those to you in real time. Or you can feel free to contact me at my email address. Perfect. So Greg and I are going to hang out for a minute or so, see if any questions come in. If any of you are going to log off, we can't thank you enough for joining in. We really appreciate your time and attention and look forward to seeing you guys in your facilities as quick as possible. Be safe and be well, but I'll hang out and see if there's any questions. Awesome, everybody. Thank you guys so much for the comments. We got a lot of great feedback that this is an interesting topic. I know I sound passionate about it because I've seen how it affects my clients that are, combating this each and every day. So let's get ahead of it, just like we do with everything else we do in fitness. Let's have that preventative approach, that true healthcare approach to fitness, and make sure that less people have to deal with this. But this is such powerful information. If you have the privilege to train people that are dealing with this, or maybe you can go out to your community, into your facilities, bring these people in and show them your expertise. Thank you guys so much. Don't hesitate to reach out at any time. Be well.